Alright, so for starters, here we have the tools of the trade. So first we've got our kit, the basic beer kit, and it comes with a package of yeast. For those who might be watching, you have your basic beer kit and a package of yeast. So, we also have our hardware, which consists of a siphon rod, a spoon, siphon hose, and primary fermenter, which is a 5-gallon bucket. And we have a pot of water and a can opener. So for tonight, this is all we need. First thing we're going to do is open the can. Okay, so part two is now that we have the can open, we're going to put it inside the pot. So first what we do is we put a pot in the sink with a little bit of water in it, half full at least, and then put the can in so that if it overflows into the sink. And then spill out a little bit of excess so that the can is only 3/4 full. And then we put on the stove and we start boiling the water. So we put it on high temperature and boil it. And the only reason that we're boiling the water is to melt the malt a bit so it flows into the primary container a little bit easier. So at the same time that that's being done, because it's going to take about probably 20 minutes. Actually, we're going to turn that down on medium heat. It's going to take about 20 minutes for that to do that, and at the same time we're going to fill this with water and sanitize it. And that's going to take about 20 minutes as well. So, and to sanitize it, we're basically going to use about 1/4 cup of bleach and then fill it the rest of the way with water. So there we go. I've got 1/4 cup of bleach. Drop it in there. And fill the rest of the way with water. So as you can see, I basically filled it just a little bit past the line, and that's just enough so that I can carry it into the bathroom without the rest of it spilling over, because the rest of the sanitation process I like to do in the bathroom. And what I'll do is I'll put this in the tub, and then it's easier to pour out afterwards to rinse it out. There. And then I top up the rest of the primary container with water using a small pail, like so. I try to, as much as possible, use water from the sink because it's more sanitary than bathroom water. The only time that I would use bathroom water instead of the sink is if, in my case, I have a hose that I can use to fill my bucket, so I'll use the sink to do that. But if I didn't have a hose, then it might be easier to fill it with the tub instead of the sink. So now that I'm in the bathroom again, I'm going to fill that. So it might take 2 or 3 times. Yeah, maybe one more time. And you want to try and get the bucket as flat as possible so that you have the water touching all the way around, because you want it to sanitize the whole bucket. So I have my second bucket. That should be enough to fill it. Now what I also want to do is take the lid, the hose, the siphon rod, and the spoon and put it all in the bucket so everything sanitizes at the same time. We throw that in there, throw the spoon in there, and we throw the siphon rod in there. And then top it up with the water. And the only thing about a tub is it isn't perfectly level, so you're not going to get all of it. But the good thing about using bleach compared to sanitizer is it has vapor, which vaporizes about at least an inch above the water constantly. So even if I've only got about 1/4 of an inch there to the top, it's still going to sanitize it. Alright, now the rest is for waiting. We've got to wait 20 minutes for the sanitation to take effect, and also for the malt to melt. So, have your favorite drink of brandy or scotch, or have a beer, whatever you like. You've got a bit of a wait. We'll be back in 20 minutes. Cheers. Alright, now we're back. It's been 20 minutes. So now we're going to empty out the pail. This is why I say to do it in the bathroom. You can empty it out pretty easily. That's a lot of water that's Alright, so step 3. Now what we want to do move this over to here, put the bucket in the sink so it's tilted inwards towards the sink, and we're going to take this hose and spray it up inside of it. And you want it tilted in towards the sink so all the water is constantly draining out, and that way you can rinse out the whole thing. Because you want to have it pretty thoroughly rinsed out to get all the bleach out of it. So what we want to do is go all the way around inside of it. And what you also want to do is you want, as you're holding it on that angle, you also want to spin it around so that you're constantly rinsing out every side of the bucket. And then last but not least, we also want to rinse out the top of the bucket, the lid, give it a nice quick rinse. Now that that's done, also our siphon rod. And our spoon. I also like to run a little bit of water through the hose, but I can't, unfortunately I can't hold the camera and show you that at the same time, so I'm going to have to turn the camera off. Okay, so now that we're done the sanitation part, we're ready to move on to stage 2. But one thing I want to note about the sanitation part is you want to try and get as much bleach out of everything as possible. Try to get as much bleach out of the siphon hose and the siphon rod and the primary container and the lid. But if there's a little bit left behind, it won't matter much anyway, because we already have chlorination in our water, so. And it kind of helps to sterilize things a bit, but you just don't want anything more than a few drops left. And if you rinse everything out thoroughly, you won't have more than that. So, next thing we're going to do is we're going to fill the primary container, and we're going to fill it to about, with this particular kit, which is only a 1.89 liters, so we want to fill it to at least about, this is a 5-gallon pail. Right here is about 16 liters, so we want to fill it to about there, and then we're going to add the malt, and then we're going to top it up the rest of the way. And when you top it up, you want to go about an inch above the line, so you get 21 liters. Alright, so first we're going to fill this up, and when you're filling it up, you want to use medium warm water, so just slightly warmer than normal water. If you have it too hot, it'll cook the yeast, and if you don't have it hot enough, the yeast won't activate and you'll die. So basically you want the water to be anywhere from 23 to about 35 degrees Celsius. 23, 25 is pretty well optimal, but you can have it to anywhere up to 35 degrees and it won't be too hot for the yeast. So now that we have it there, we're going to start filling our pail. So we'll be back once the pail's finished. Cheers. Alright, so our bucket is 4/5 full, and now we're about to add the malt. The malt has been sitting here for 25 minutes now. And as you can see by the foam on the top, it's ready to go. So, I'm just going to grab a rag so I can lift it without burning my hand. And we're just going to pour it straight into the water. And because we've heated it, it's going to pour out relatively easily. There we go, and then the rest we rinse out with our hose here. Try to get as much of this out as possible. Waste not, want not. And then we'll top up all the way. Like I said, you want it to go at least about an inch above the line, and that gives it a good 21 liters. And the foam will generally get about an inch thick itself, so we're going to go 2 inches above. And there we go. So now that we have everything ready, we're going to stir the wort up. So the stuff that's in the can is called a malt, and once you add it to the water, it's called a wort. So we stir the wort up, make sure that we get everything evenly distributed. good to stir it for a good 5 minutes. Stir it all the way around. Make sure as you're stirring it that you're getting all of the bottom, because when you pour the malt in, it'll tend to settle on the bottom. So you want to try and get it all off of the bottom and submersed in the wort. Alright. Now you want to feel the side of the temperature and make sure that it's not too hot. Like I said, the temperature should be at least between 23 and 35 degrees Celsius. Closer to 23, 25. And if you get it above temperature and you want to cool it fast, throw a couple ice cubes in it. And that should be enough for it. Provided that you're not over 35. Alright, so then the last thing that we do is add the yeast after everything is stirred. And it's important that you do add the yeast after everything is stirred. If you do it beforehand, you're not supposed to stir the yeast after it's been added. Because the yeast isn't supposed to be agitated. So, after everything stops roughly spinning, or mostly, then you add the yeast and make sure you sprinkle it all across the whole top. Okay, now that the yeast is added, now we put the lid on. Want to get a nice tight seal. Because you don't want any bad bacteria getting into this. Some people use a cloth to cover it, but in general it's better to use the plastic lid that comes with the pail because it's the most sanitary. Because cloth is going to trap moisture, and once the cloth traps moisture, it's going to attract bacteria to the rag, which is going to poison your brew. And if you want to have a brew that doesn't get infected, you want to use a lid. So, that's why I drink brandy when I'm doing it, for now anyway. You should get an airlock. The airlock goes in this little hole right there, but if you don't have an airlock, a glass tipped upside down over top of the airlock will work just fine. And it doesn't hurt to drink a little bit of hard liquor out of it either, because the hard liquor will help sanitize the glass. Whew. Okay, now our glass is empty. We put it over top. And we move the brew over into a quiet corner of the room that isn't going to see much traffic, because you don't want to disturb it. A brew is much like rising bread in an oven. You don't want to agitate it because it'll make the yeast fall. And especially with a beer yeast, works from the top down, so you want to have that yeast on the top. Okay, just a few side notes. First of all, this kit that we've done is a can kit. This is the easiest kit to do. There's 3 different things that I'm going to show you over the next couple of months. First is the beginner basics, which it's best to start with a can kit.
They're pretty cheap. They cost anywhere from $10 to $15 to start. And if you screw them up the first time, then it's not a big deal because you didn't spend a lot of money. And they're pretty simple. You don't need to use any extra products except for the can of malt and the package of yeast that comes with it. The second kit that you can use is a premium beer kit. It's a bit more complicated to start, and it's a bit more costly. For starters, as far as more complicated, a premium kit usually is about anywhere from 8 to 16 liters depending on the kit, compared to a can kit which is only 1.89 liters. Now the difference between a can kit and a premium kit in quality is that a can kit has to have added sugar to it. So it's refined sugar that makes up a bulk of the alcohol, which gives it a pretty strong, almost like a fortified cheap alcohol taste. Whereas if you use premium kits, the only sugar that you're using is in the actual barley malt, which means it's a natural sugar. It's a fructose sugar instead of glucose sugar, so it has more of a natural beer taste to it. Second of all, a premium kit usually comes with bentonite, which is a preservative. And sometimes they come with a sanitizer too, which you can dissolve in the water and leave in the water. You don't need to rinse it out afterwards, and it'll keep your beer from going sour. And the price range, like I said, a cheap can kit can cost anywhere from $10 to $15, and a premium kit can cost anywhere from $25 to $40. So first we're going to show you the cheap kit, and then we're going to show you the premium kit, and then the last thing we're going to show you is how to make your own malt from barley, which is the most complicated process of all and the most chance of things going wrong. But if you get the basics of brewing first, the chance of you screwing up once you've graduated to malting your own barley is a lot slimmer than going straight to malting your own barley. So that's about it. So next week we'll come back and we'll show you the bottling process. Now, in order to know how fully fermented the wort is, there's two different ways you can do it. One is to use a hydrometer and measure the specific gravity at the point that we're at today, where we just added everything. So before you put the yeast in, which is the last step, you put a hydrometer in and you take the reading, and then you want to go 5 increments above that. So when you come back in 5 to 6 days, basically it's done when it's come up 5 increments from the original point when you measured it on the first day. I never do it that way. The whole 14 years that I've been brewing, I've never done it that way. What I find the simplest way to do it is tomorrow, and I'll show you how it looks tomorrow. You're going to see a nice thick foam that's about anywhere from 1/2 inch to 1 inch tall, and you're going to see rapid action, lots of bubbles coming up almost like a champagne. And that process is going to go for about 4 to 5 days, and you'll know that it's done when all that has subsided and all the bubbles have gone and it's flat on the top. Like if you left a glass of pop for a couple hours and came back and it was flat, that's when you know that it's ready. For me, that seems like a way easier process than using a hydrometer, because in some cases you might not have a hydrometer. It's pretty it's about probably $40–50 just to start your kit with a basic setup of a siphon rod, a primary container, siphon hose, and your sanitizers and whatnot. So, and then you got to buy your kit on top of it. So if you're just starting out and you want to go as cheap as possible without buying a bunch of stuff that you don't need, all you really need is your primary bucket, your siphon rod, your siphon hose, your spoon, and your sanitizer, and your kit, and a glass to put on top of the pail. You could, and at a certain point, you can buy the hydrometer, you can buy a proper airlock, and sanitizers. You can buy a carboy, because when you get into doing the premium kits, your first week of primary fermentation is in the pail, and then you transfer it to a carboy and let it age for another 2 weeks and let it settle. But because this is a cheap kit, you basically just ferment it in the primary and then it goes straight into bottles. Okay, so that's all we're doing for today. Tomorrow I'll show you the foam that I was talking about, and then we'll come back next week and show you the bottling process. Cheers.